Good afternoon. It's the 22nd of January. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. An invitation from U.S. House of Representatives Speaker John Boehner to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address Congress next month is creating diplomatic outrage. IBA's Margot Dudkevich reports.
An invitation from U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Republican John Boehner to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address Congress next month has plunged the Israeli leader into hot water. The invitation stunned the White House, who called it a breach of diplomatic protocol. Netanyahu's political foes say it will give the Prime Minister the chance to strengthen his security agenda, part of his political campaign for the upcoming elections.
Certainly, traditionally, we would learn about the plans of a leader to come to the United States separately from learning about it from the Speaker of the House, which is how we learned of Prime Minister Netanyahu's plans to come and speak to a joint session. Now, he's spoken to a joint session many times in the past. That's certainly not something we have opposed, nor do we oppose it in general in this case. We don't have information at this point on what he'll be speaking about. Obviously, we have ongoing discussions, the Secretary does, with Prime Minister Netanyahu about a range of issues. Security, the ongoing tensions, those will certainly continue.
Netanyahu, who accepted the invitation, is expected to deliver a speech that will focus on the Iranian nuclear threat, the Islamic State, Hamas, and the threat of growing anti-Semitism. Reports suggest that it was Israel's ambassador to the US, Ron Dermer, who initiated the idea after conspiring with the Republicans who dominate the Congress, in what Israeli media is describing as a political stunt. The New York Times suggested that the Republicans who control both houses in Congress invited Netanyahu to challenge President Obama on his foreign policy, in an effort to prove he does not treat the issues seriously enough. White House spokesman Josh Earnest told reporters traveling with US President Barack Obama on Air Force One that protocols suggest that the leader of one country would contact the leader of another country when traveling there. Earnest said he would reserve judgment until Netanyahu's plans are clarified. US Speaker John Boehner staunchly defended the invitation.
I did not consult with the White House. The Congress can make this decision on its own. I don't believe I'm poking anyone in the eye. There is a serious threat that exists in the world. And the president last night kind of papered over it. And the fact is that there needs to be a more serious conversation in America about how serious the threat is from radical Islamic jihadists and the threat posed by Iran.
Ties between Jerusalem and Washington can be described as somewhat rocky, with some saying they've reached an all-time low. It is unclear whether Netanyahu will meet with Obama when he travels to Washington next month. Based on the current atmosphere, it appears he will not. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
U.S. and Iranian negotiators will hold bilateral talks about Tehran's nuclear program in Davos tomorrow and Saturday. The Swiss talks come amid reported disagreement between top Israeli leaders over the potential benefits of additional U.S. sanctions as international negotiations continue. Bloomberg News is reporting that Israeli intelligence agencies are at odds with Prime Minister Netanyahu's support of fresh sanctions, citing Mossad sources, saying that more economic penalties would mean the demise of the talks. A short time ago, the Mossad issued an official statement denying the Bloomberg report. The Obama administration and U.S. intelligence agencies also oppose any attempts by congressional lawmakers to pass tougher legislation to force Iranian concessions. While explaining the White House position, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry also made reference to Israeli intelligence.
With respect to more sanctions, our friends in Europe have made it very clear, look, we have partners in this. We're trying to convince our fellow, my former colleagues in Congress, that the United States acting unilaterally is not always the best step to take. And in this case, we have a number of other serious partners: China, Russia, France, Germany, Great Britain, and we are all at this table negotiating together in an effort facilitated by the EU, in an effort to be able to come to some agreement. Now, the sanctions don't exist simply because of the United States. And if all of our partners were to say, well, we don't think you're going the right way, we're going to go do our own thing, this can all fall apart, including the sanctions regime. You can lose the sanctions altogether. So deciding to act unilaterally is not exactly a strategy for success. We've been successful because we've kept everybody together. And everybody together has helped enforce these sanctions over a long period of time. And it's very important to allow the executive branch of government, which in our Constitution has the right to be able to do this negotiation, to do it. And then there's plenty of time for people to make judgments about how they feel about it. So I think in Israel, one of the top intelligence personnel within the Israeli intelligence field, I won't name names, but this person was asked directly by a congressional delegation that visited there over the weekend what the effect of sanctions would be, and this person answered that it would be like throwing a grenade into the process.
U.S. Secretary of State Kerry and French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius were among other senior European officials to arrive in London today, where they will participate in a conference of the International Coalition Combating the Islamic State Forces. In addition to coordinating efforts to fight the radical jihadists, the foreign ministers of 22 nations will also consider the provision of greater military assistance to those fighting ISIS on the ground, as well as greater humanitarian aid for its victims. Meanwhile, Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi was greeted by British Prime Minister David Cameron at his number 10 Downing Street residence.
A very warm welcome, Prime Minister Abadi, to number 10 Downing Street. It's very good to have you here. You're here, obviously, on an important day when the key members of the coalition to help Iraq and defeat ISIL are meeting here in London. And really, I want to say very clearly to you how strongly we support the new Iraqi government country, because the threat from extremist terror that you face in Iraq is also a threat that we face right here in the United Kingdom.
Here at home, the driver who was seriously wounded in the Tel Aviv terror attack on Bus 40 yesterday morning has regained consciousness and is improving. Medical staff at Tel Aviv Sourasky Medical Center say that despite that progress, however, Herzl Biton remains in serious condition and is still attached to a respirator. The 62-year-old underwent emergency life-saving surgery to repair significant internal damage soon after being repeatedly stabbed in the stomach as he struggled with the 23-year-old assailant Hamza Matrouk. A 69-year-old female passenger on the bus also continues to struggle for her life at the intensive care unit. 19 people were wounded in the attack who were treated at Sourasky yesterday, 15 of whom were released. 4 others are being treated at the Sheba Medical Center, one of whom is still in serious condition. Matrouk was apprehended after being shot in the leg and is in police custody. During overnight raids in his home neighborhood at the Nur al-Shams camp in Tulkarm, the army arrested Matrouk's brother Yunus and friend Hitham Harbouch. In Ra'anana, a 22-year-old Palestinian today allegedly attempted to stab police officers as they arrested him for being in the country illegally. During a search, police found an additional knife in his possession. Jerusalem mayor Nir Barkat paid his respects at the Hyper Kasher supermarket in Paris, where 4 Jews were killed by a terrorist nearly 2 weeks ago. Barkat joined many other foreign leaders who have visited the French capital following the series of attacks that have claimed the lives of 17 victims. After laying a wreath outside the supermarket, Barkat addressed the question of French immigration to Israel and called on world leaders to fight Islamist extremists.
It's not about Jews or not Jews. The message I have to say here in Paris is it's about the good guys and the bad guys. It's the good people that want to live together and the bad people that want to derail us living together. And same in Jerusalem. We will make all the efforts in the world to improve quality of life of all residents, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and we will fight extremists wherever they are. They, of course, have open door in Jerusalem and in Israel. If they seek to come and live in the Jewish state, of course, they're welcome to do that, and we will help anyone that wants to come to Jerusalem. But we're here to convey a very clear message. Jews have to feel secure everywhere in the world. They have the option, like anybody else, to live anywhere they want.
Argentinian investigators have discovered unidentified fingerprints and shoe impressions in an outdoor passageway connected to the apartment of federal prosecutor Alberto Nisman, who died of a gunshot wound to the head on Sunday. He was leading an investigation into the 1994 bombing of the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires and found dead in his apartment just hours before he was set to provide evidence against his nation's president, Cristina Fernandez, in a cover-up to absolve Iran of involvement in the attack. Authorities in Buenos Aires insist that Nisman's death was a suicide, although evidence emerging over the past 2 days is now casting doubt on that ruling. The El Litoral newspaper is reporting that investigators discovered a previously unknown point of access into Nisman's apartment and are now trying to establish whether it could have been used by an assassin. Meanwhile, protests in the Argentinian capital by members of the public unwilling to accept the suicide theory continue. Jewish community leaders say that they are baffled and saddened by the developments and that all of those in the community who had the pleasure of meeting Nisman over the years are grief-stricken. Times of Israel editor-in-chief David Horovitz knew Alberto Nisman and said that he died because he could not be deterred. He told IBA's Aria O'Sullivan that it is incredulous that anyone could believe that he committed suicide.
The notion that he would have taken his own life, I mean, it's an insult. And it's an insult to him, it's also an insult to the intelligence.
And yet, what's happening with his case? Will his death be in vain?
Well, you worry. I mean, first of all, there are two big lies being told in the last few days. The first is that he killed himself, which, he didn't. And the second, that the Amir case was never solved. And I see this being reported all over the place. The Amir case was solved, by the way, in contrast to lots of other terrorist outrages that have never been properly resolved. Alberto Nisman, over the last 10 years, succeeded in tracing the line of responsibility for the worst terrorist attack in Argentina, in which 85 people were killed, all the way back to Iran, to a particular meeting in August 1993. He knew who was at that meeting. He had evidence from defectors, other sources, so credible that Interpol placed key Iranian leaders on a watch list, which means that if these people travel through certain countries that are members of Interpol, they're supposed to be arrested and extradited. We knew who carried out the bombing. We know the Lebanese man who drove the bomb into the building. We know that Imad Mugniyeh, the Hezbollah terror chief, was in Buenos Aires until days before the attack, coordinating and orchestrating the attack. So the Amir bombing was solved. However, to Nisman's great dismay, his own government, his own country, did not push hard enough to bring those Iranians to justice, didn't champion his investigation and his findings effectively enough. And he moved on to two other areas. He first of all exposed further Iranian terrorist networks in South America, which he publicized more recently. And then he developed this case against Fernandez, the Argentinian president, ironically the widow of the former Argentinian president, who appointed him to the case because he was so offended by what had been a farcical investigation until that point.
So the intrigue is that Argentina came to a deal with Iran. But what was in it for Argentina?
Well, the allegation that he was documenting, and he said he had phone conversations and all kinds of other supportive evidence, was that Cristina Fernandez concluded, or her and her advisors concluded, that Argentina's interests required rebuilding relations with Iran, potential of trade relations with Iran, oil and grain in opposite directions, helping rehabilitate Iran for the perceived interest of Argentina. Now, we don't have the capacity at this stage to judge the veracity of those allegations. We do have a credible track record by a dedicated investigator to take seriously, and you have this you don't want to say predictable, this terrible tragedy that this person who would not be deterred, who knew that he was threatened all the time. I mean, he told me one of the death threats that he got was left on his answer phone, and what was particularly dismaying about it was that his daughter was standing next to him when he played it. Not that he was intimidated by it, but that it was troubling for him that his daughter had to hear this. He was not going to be sidetracked.
Our reporter adds that a short time ago, Argentinian President Cristina Fernandez declared that Nisman's death was not by suicide, as initially reported. Without naming names, Fernandez pointed the finger at persons involved in a conspiracy to smear her. In other news, there has been a ray of light for American pop star Madonna after police arrested an Israeli man for involvement in hacking her personal computers back in December. Reporter Alexandra Jen has more on the story.
Well, Aaron, a local private eye, the police, and the FBI joined forces to find a suspect who harmed the Material Girl over the last month.
I was beat, incomplete. I've been
So we're doing the holiday joke. Are you going to say something afterward? That was Madonna's mood until a Tel Aviv man was arrested for hacking into her computer. Adi Liederman, a musician himself, is suspected of leaking and selling Madonna's unreleased tracks back in December. Police are currently requesting he stay under house arrest. Madonna released a statement saying, "I am profoundly grateful to the FBI, the Israeli police investigators, and anyone else who helped lead to the arrest of this hacker. Like any citizen, I have the right to privacy. This invasion into my life, creatively, professionally, and personally, remains a deeply devastating and hurtful experience." Adi Liederman, 39 years old, was a contestant on an Israeli TV talent show, Kochav Nolad.
You're so consumed with how much you get.
Liederman is being charged on accounts of cyber hacking, copyright violation, and fraudulent receipt of goods. Madonna, also known as Esther, wasn't the only artist hacked by the suspect. There were other international artists as well. The pop star has been on this incident for months. After 13 of her tracks were prematurely released, she reportedly attempted to find the hacker herself. She Skyped a traitor and begged him to give her the source of the copyrighted music. After finding evidence that the hacker was out of Israel, she turned to a private investigative firm in Tel Aviv, Wiseman Yaar Investigations. The Wiseman firm tracked Liederman and then turned the information over to the Lahav 433 Special Police Unit. The FBI was also involved in the investigation.
Everything's changed. I'll never be the same.
Madonna was devastated when the incomplete tracks were released in December. After much consideration, she decided to produce 6 of the tracks from the album Rebel Heart early. She claims the cyber attack was a surprise because she and her team had gone to great lengths to keep their system secure. Madonna hopes to this hacking incident, which she considers a form of terrorism. She will be performing songs from the album Rebel Heart at the Grammys next month. Let's hope Madonna wants to show her appreciation by gracing our shores with another concert appearance or holiday.
That would be so fine. Thank you, Alexandra. In other news stories, senior politicians, business leaders, and academics are meeting in Davos for the World Economic Forum, where they are addressing the primary issues dominating current affairs. Key challenges outlined for discussion include economic growth, climate change, and the future of the Internet. Speakers at the 45th annual meeting in the Swiss mountain resort also included Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko giving an impassioned speech condemning Russian aggression. Former British Prime Minister and current Quartet Middle East peace envoy Tony Blair urged world leaders to combat the causes of terrorism.
At some point we've got to deal with the root problem, which is educating people to a closed-minded view of the world that says if you're not like me, you're my enemy. And we've got to stop making excuses for those people and start to tackle the fundamental incubation of that problem, which lies in formal and informal education systems, educating young people to a culture of hatred to those that are different. And if we don't deal with that, we can debate the political issues forever, but we're never going to get to the root of the problem.
But I think
Countries in the Middle East and Central Asia are expected to lose up to $300 billion this coming year due to the more than 50% decline in petroleum prices. This is according to the International Monetary Fund, which has downgraded exporting nations' growth prospects by as much as 1%. This reflects a significant drop from its 3.8% growth that was forecast in October. Oil importing nations in the region, such as Morocco, should see small gains, while Lebanon and Egypt are likely to see improved fiscal balances. IMF officials say that they now expect the hardest hit countries, particularly dependent on oil exports, such as Qatar, Iraq, Libya, and Saudi Arabia, to implement strategies to protect their economies.
Our current expectation is that while there will indeed be some reduction in terms of government spending this year compared to what they were planning, this will be done in a measured way, and as a result, the impact of the lower oil price on overall economic activity and growth in these countries is going to be much smaller than the impact on their budgets or on their balance of payments. So they absorb the impact on their budgets and their balance of payments by using the reserves that they have built up, and this will then mitigate the effect on growth.
Turning to sports and talk about your David and Goliath stories. Israel's #1 tennis player, Dudi Sela, who is ranked 106th in the world, will go up against one of the game's all-time greats and current #3, Rafael Nadal, at the Australian Open tomorrow. Sela already scored an upset in 4 sets over the 28th seed, Lucas Rosal, to make it past the second round of a Grand Slam tournament for the first time since 2009. During his triumph, Sela enjoyed the support of a large portion of the crowd. That included enthusiastic and boisterous Israelis and members of Melbourne's Jewish community. In local finance, both the shekel and share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange put in a mixed performance today. Here's a look at the afternoon numbers. The IBA weather team tells us we can expect another day of unseasonably warm temperatures only under mostly sunny skies tomorrow, although the winds in the north are likely to become stronger. Here's the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. I'll be back at this desk tomorrow, same time, same channel, to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. We now leave you with images of a group of dolphins spotted swimming together off the coast of Ashdod in the warm currents of the Mediterranean Sea. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.